The comparison between the cases of Peter Lynch and the men arrested at the airport, at Manchester Airport in July 2024, highlights the tensions around perceived disparities of justice in the UK. Lynch, his 61-year-old grandfather, was sentenced to almost 3 years in prison for his role in protests outside an asylum-seeking hotel, and his punishment for brandishing offensive placards and making inflammatory remarks, though deeply unpleasant, and they cannot be condoned, has sparked debate about whether his sentence was disproportionately harsh, especially since he did not physically harm anyone or cause significant property damage. I think the two-tier policing debate is, I think that debate which is going on social media at the moment is looking at the wrong comparisons. Lynch's death in prison has been seen by some as a tragic consequence of the state's attempt to manage public unrest over immigration and the summer riots. But there is a distinction to be made, not so much between the Manchester Airport issue, which I think is important, and the Lynch issue, but between the Lynch issue and the issue of other people in positions of power who were similarly provocative on social media. And frankly, who have got away with it. The arrest of Mohammed Fahir Amaz and his brothers at Manchester Airport involved a violent altercation with police captured on video, which led to further protests and to an ongoing investigation into the Independent Office of Police Conduct. And footage showed a firearms officer striking a man who was lying on the ground, kicking him, leading to public outrage and comparisons with cases like Lynch's, where the police's use of force is also questioned. A more appropriate comparison might be between Lynch and other people like Lucy Connolly and Bernie Spofford, who were also caught in the legal backlash surrounding anti-immigration riots. And both women face legal consequences for their online or public actions in the aftermath of the Southport killings, which stoked tensions around immigration and asylum policies. Was Lynch a political prisoner? I don't think so. But should other people have been questioned and held accountable for their actions? Yes. And their position seems to rule them out of the inquiry. Ahmed Yaqub, the solicitor representing the Amaz brothers, highlighted the brutality involved in their arrest, absolutely, and the protests that continued, demanding accountability from the police, absolutely. This case raised questions about the equitable application of justice, with some suggesting that Lynch, like others who voiced inflammatory views, became a political prisoner in the government's attempt to control the narrative surrounding immigration. This context sets the stage for broader discussions of how protests, public sentiment, the state's response intersect, especially when political or social crises like the Stockport murders and the wider immigration debate become flashpoints for national unrest. But Lynch has not committed any. Lynch did not commit any violence himself. He didn't hurt anybody. He didn't damage property. And yet he merited this enormous sentence for holding a placard containing conspiracy theory rubbish and calling the police scum, when others were doing just as much and getting away with it. Is it just that he was visible at the time? He has a history of protest, and he's quite passionate. Listen to what he's got to say here, because I find it interesting how Lynch is a Brexiteer who feels that his vote for Brexit has been overlooked, and he's been channeled into this anti-immigration trope. Channeled by whom?
Right, so tell us why you're here today.
Because we did a vote in 2016, the democratic vote, it's not being upheld. Partly Parliament's took it onto themselves. The corrupt MPs have took it onto themselves to deny our vote what we put them in power for. But now they're in power, they're stuck there defying what we've put them in there for. And all these corrupt MPs now are saying they're getting picked on and abused, but why not? They actually went in there to do a job and they've gone and turned against will of people, which is absolutely ridiculous. I mean, how do we go by our rights and bring our children up if the corrupt system all the way through, police, judicial services, everything, it's all involved. Parliament, MPs, everything, they're all corrupt. We get Prime Ministers corrupt. So how can we tell our children to bring them up straight and narrow when everybody above them is corrupt, but yet they're expecting the people to do as they're told by people that's not doing as they're told what we're putting here for. So I just can't see around it unless they come out to Brexit.
So how do you think democracy is democracy?
And then he turns up after the Stockport riots, or during the Stockport riots, at an asylum hotel. And the public sentiment, the state's response, the notion of a two-tier system, and Lynch seems to be the fall guy whose offences are more symbolic or ideological and who receives a disproportionately heavy sentence, while more violent or chaotic incidents are met with equally severe legal scrutiny, but under different public expectations and social media comments that parallel those of Lynch, even if they're couched in the language of questions rather than statements, are overlooked. There, I think, is the two-tier system of justice. People who have authority have responsibility. And this sort of constant questioning and this constant diversion of Brexit, frustration over Brexit into frustration over immigration, that seems to me to be a programmed move. And Lynch was caught up in that. As for the Manchester airport thing, I'm afraid although social media wants to find parallels and wants to find a sort of contrast between the two arrests, I think it's an irrelevance, I'm afraid. And I think people like Isabel Oakeshott and others are working very hard and writing very hard to wriggle out of a position that they're caught in, because they are the people who have moved this. They are the people who've moved this debate from Brexit to immigration, and they have channeled this frustration and that level of demagoguery, whether from so-called journalists or from politicians, is dangerous. The politicians, the journalists seem to get away with it. The weight of justice falls on this. It's scapegoating in individuals like Lynch and like Lucy Connolly. And I think we need to be more holistic. We need to look at what's actually happening and how the frustrations of the Brexit camp are being channeled. Because let's be very clear, Brexit has caused nothing but frustration. And for the committed Brexiteers, there's precious little that they can look to as a signal that Brexit has worked. Brexit for them There are some Brexiteers who are saying, well, this isn't our Brexit. Brexit hasn't been done. And there are some who are saying, oh, it's the COVID vaccine. That's what Andrea Leadsom says. But it's nonsense. Brexit has been done. And Brexit has proven to be a disaster. And the frustrations of those who supported it, I think are being channeled into this anti-immigration action. And that's harmful, and that's bad, and I think there's every reason why Lynch would wonder what's gone wrong and be so despairing. And similarly, Lucy Connolly. In their eyes, I'm sure, all they're doing is voicing what they've heard.